Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's Wednesday.
I feel like we should speak quietly because it's still a little bit early and maybe not everyone is properly caffeinated. By everyone, I mean me.
I mean, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, people on the East Coast are like, what are you talking about? It's noon. Anyway, good morning, guys. It's a Boss Up and List day. We now have the show every other Wednesday. We've brought it back. And this is our second
Back
show.
by popular demand.
Really? Yeah, I know. As said
that.
by the 9 people watching us.
I don't know about that, but
I will say, there's a real good chance. In fact, I'm going to guarantee it that we're going to have less people watching live today than normal.
Fewer.
Because I will say whatever I want to say, okay? And I'm saying there's going to be less people watching. Anyway, because obviously we're talking about taxes, and if you're like me, taxes are scary and you don't really want to have to deal with them or listen to them. But I know for a fact that probably most of you out there either at least just dread taxes or have lots of questions about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we have...
I think it's fair. I think it's fair to say that taxes are the anchor around a lot of self-employed people's necks, or they feel like it is. It's confusing. This is not what we specialize in. So let me just find the interesting crap and sell it. I don't want to know how I have to handle tax time. But the reality is you have to handle it, right? I mean, what's the expression? There's two things that are definite in life: death and taxes. So
Indeed.
I probably butchered that quote, but you know what I'm saying. So, you have to learn how to handle your business. Yep. And part of that is being a responsible contributing member of society and paying your damn taxes.
Indeed. So today, before we bring him out, I am going to give you my own little testimonial, but we do have Mark Tew on today from Not Your Dad's CPA. And let me tell you, when you are a business owner, small business owner, you have different companies, different vendors that you work with. And I will say that hands down, Mark is my favorite person that I hired to help me with my business. And that's because taxes are the scariest, I think, hardest, most anxiety-ridden part of a small business, and having somebody that you can trust that does the job for you.
That doesn't talk down to you. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make you feel like you're being talked down to. That doesn't make you feel like you're being judged. Because let's face it, if you're behind on your taxes and you feel like crap about that, you're already anxious enough. You certainly don't need a tax professional to make you feel like shit about it, right? Let's be real. Yeah. And Mark is very, very good at making you feel heard, understood, explaining the unexplainable. Yeah. And figuring out the complication that you've made in your head of your taxes, when the reality is it's probably far less complicated than you think it is. He takes the complication out of it.
Absolutely.
And while we sound like one big long commercial and testimonial from Mark, I will tell you that Katie and I have both used Mark for the past 2 years separately to do our taxes. We will continue to use him. And
we pay him just like anyone else does.
And we pay him just like anyone else does. We do not get our taxes done for free to do this testimonial. We are sharing our experience with you guys because we trust in him. And like everything else, when we bring a product to you, and there's only been a couple, when we bring a product or a service to you, it's something that we use ourselves, that we believe in ourselves, and that we truly give you a testimonial about. Because, the reality is a lot of people that are YouTubers, and I'm not naming names, but there are a lot of people that are YouTubers that are just going to sling any old product because they're going to get some kind of kickback for it. We don't operate that way. And I think if you've watched us long enough, you probably know that. That's probably one of the reasons why we're a very small YouTube channel still, and that's okay. But you guys trust us, and we would never bring something to you that we don't believe in ourselves. Yeah,
and I see that other people in the chat, Brenda Files, that also use Mark as their CPA. So real quick, I just wanted to talk about my personal experience. Back late 2015, I left my last 9-to-5 job where I got my normal W-2s and all that stuff, and I ventured out into starting my business. And this is when I was back in Oregon, and I proceeded to not do my taxes for over 3 years. And I had, for a lot of reasons, it was just like starting at my own business, all the questions around that and not being sure. And then as time went on, I kept ignoring it. And then I moved
to the albatross. It's the thing in the room you don't want to talk about.
And then I moved to Vegas. So now I had like state taxes to think about for Oregon. I had drawn unemployment while I was in Oregon, starting my own business. I had all these things going on. I won the Shine Award with eBay in 2017. And, I had to deal with taxes on that. And like, not just the prize money that I got, but also their valuation on the different prizes that came along with it and services. So there were like all these things kind of hanging over my head. And it was so overwhelming and I was so nervous about it. And then as time went on, it just gets worse to the point where it's always kind of in the back of your head nagging you. And it's like, no matter how successful you feel like your business is going, you've got this thing kind of hanging over your head that makes you more and more worried about it. And if you're like me, your way of dealing with that is just ignoring it and pretending like it's not there and just constantly suffering, which is really just the stupidest thing ever. But I think that probably some of you guys can relate to that. So early 2019, we actually had Mark on here for the first time to talk about taxes. And really, it was like I was using that as like, it was almost like I was having all of you guys.
You were interviewing him?
Well, it was like I was having all of you guys as my accountability because I was coming out publicly saying, I have not done my taxes in forever. I'm freaking out. Mark, make me feel better.
You tax dodger, you.
Exactly. And so then it was kind of my opportunity to force myself to face it. And then a few months later was when I finally hired Mark to take care of that for me. And let me tell you, it was not as painful as I thought it was going to be. It was not as horrible as I thought it was going to be. I finally got caught up and was able to deal with everything. And that was really thanks to Mark. And so that's kind of like my
He takes the big weight off your shoulders. And can I tell you, I don't know, he's got this formula down pat. I mean, honestly, if you use his formula, which we're going to talk about as far as sending him the information for your taxes, I think he's done in like 20 minutes, I swear. But honestly, he's so good at it. He's got it down and dialed into a science. And I still stress about taxes. I'm one of those people that say every year I'm gonna settle up every month. Bullshit. I'm never gonna do it. It's just not who I am. I'm not going to do my taxes every month. I'm not going to look at my books every month. And sorry, Teresa, I know this is making you cringe.
You should apologize to Mark too, because he would probably not advise you.
I know he would not advise me to handle my life that way. But the reality is that I will probably always get an extension too. Let's face it. That's the reality. That's who I am.
Yeah,
but
you get it done.
But what I will do is that I will sit down a couple of weeks before that extension is due, because I don't do it the day before, but I'll do it a couple weeks before. And Katie and I did it this year. We both set aside a specific Saturday and said, we're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything. We're getting our taxes in today.
Yeah.
And we did. And you know what? Now that I've been doing my taxes with Mark for a little bit, it only took me 6 hours and I had avoided it for an entire year.
Yeah. And then you send everything into Mark and it's like the next day he's done.
It's magic.
It's just ridiculous.
It's magic.
Anyway, let's go ahead and bring Mark out. Mark Tew, everybody, from
He's
Not
wearing his
Vets.
cape. He's sitting up very straight today.
Not
He's wearing
Vets,
his Superman
CPA.
cape.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, you should be.
What's up, Mark? Now you disappointed everyone. There's no Superman cape. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
It's going well. I feel like I have to give some negatives about myself to offset all that stuff you were.
All right.
Feel free to fess up if you need to. This could be.
No, I appreciate that though, and I don't think I've ever used the term unflappable in my life. I had to look that up, but that's a good word.
Awesome. So I guess what I would ask you to start with is why don't you give people a little bit of background about like who you are, what you do, how you're connected to the reseller world, because I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah. So, I studied accounting, did the public accounting and finance thing for a few years, and then started doing taxes on the side. I got into like the personal finance sort of blogging world and made some connections and eventually just ended up on an eBay podcast and just, started seeing friends who were selling stuff on Amazon and eBay. So about the same time I started selling online is when I started specializing more in helping online resellers with taxes and just with their businesses in general. 4 or 5 years ago, and have been specializing in that niche ever since.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because I think for a lot of people, it's like you've started your own business, but it's kind of a unique one selling online. You're looking for someone to help you with your taxes, but you're worried that maybe they're not going to understand this whole world of reselling.
The nuances of that go around.
And I think that's what's really great about working with you, Mark, is that because you do it yourself, especially, you really understand what that's all about, what information needs to be gathered, everything that can be written off, and
that's the most important thing. Let's be fair. He knows all the things that can be written off legally and should be written off to help offset the taxes that you owe. A lot of people that don't understand the reselling world in general won't know the right questions to ask because they just don't quite understand. He understands what all of those things may be that you may not even know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's like jump right in because people are going to have questions. And one of the things that I see, there are obviously a lot of people are avoiding our show today, so they don't have to think about this. But being in different reseller groups on Facebook, we see a lot of the same kind of posts around this time of year. And I see a comment in the chat as well where people start asking the question or they start saying like they don't sell enough to pay taxes, or I only did this much and I didn't get any 1099, so I don't have to pay taxes, right? Can you address that? Give the, and then there's other people who say like, don't ask for tax advice on the internet. So you are a CPA. When do people have to start paying taxes on their income, Mark?
I mean, part of me doesn't want to answer that because, I want to let people continue to live in their ignorance, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think there's the real answer, and then there's what people do. But what is the real answer, the appropriate answer? What are you supposed to do when you make money selling online?
Appropriate. Yeah. I mean, like there are some certain threshold. Well, I mean, the simple answer is like basically on the first dollar of profit that you make, that's usually going to be taxable. So it's not like if you sell under a certain amount, then you don't have to report it. I mean, there are some cases, but just assume that you'll have to report it and pay some tax on it.
Yeah.
That's the easy answer.
That's the easy answer. And then I think like the biggest, because you're talking about profit. And so the biggest thing we can tell people is a lot of times when somebody just starts reselling, our advice to them is like, start selling stuff from around your house. So in that case, you bought something, let's say you bought a shirt for $30 5 years ago, and then you sell it on eBay for $15, you didn't make any profit. So that's something you wouldn't pay taxes on.
Unless if you wanted to get real complicated, unless the fair market value is only $5 and you sold it for $15. But let's not confuse people with that. That's a little bit too confusing.
Well, you're the one who's starting to confuse people.
I know I'm right.
I'd say bottom line is hire somebody like Mark, and then you don't even have to think about this stuff.
Yeah. Yep. That was all correct. So if you have a loss, then you don't necessarily have to, you won't owe any taxes on it, but it would only benefit you to report it because that loss can offset income you have, other income you have in that year, or can be carried forward to offset future income. So, I mean, it's only going to benefit you to report all that.
Yeah. So somebody who's a small business owner, what advice would you give? Like, at what point should they be thinking about getting a CPA to help them with taxes?
I mean, a lot of that just depends on your comfort level, and the complexity of their situation. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, let's say you don't resell or don't have any self-employment income. Let's say all you have is like a W-2 from a job. I mean, that's a lot less complex and less likely that you're going to mess it up if you're doing your taxes yourself on TurboTax or whatever. But then all of a sudden, if you have a job, some type of self-employment, you're selling on eBay or something, all of a sudden there's this world that opens up to you of like all these different deductions you can take. And, how should I be deducting my inventory and all these little things that you might not be familiar with. And I mean, programs like TurboTax, they do a pretty good job of walking you through that, but I still get people emailing me like screenshots of TurboTax questions. They're like, what does this mean? Like, what am I supposed to put here? Like, so if that's you, then it might be helpful to get a CPA or some type of experienced tax preparer to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I feel like it's makes so much sense because, and especially the way you do it, Mark, for anyone who hasn't used Mark before for a CPA, one of the best tools I think that you provide, Mark, is your tax organizer. So every year, and actually you make it available on your website for people to look at before they even hire you to do their taxes. So it's a tool that's available for anybody, but I think it's fantastic. And so basically it's this spreadsheet, and I actually pulled it up because I want people to see it so they kind of get an idea. I just think it's the coolest tool ever. And I'm
a person that hates spreadsheets, and even I like this thing.
It's my favorite spreadsheet ever. But it's basically the document that you have us fill out, and you fill it out and send it into Mark. And this is basically how he does your taxes. I'm sure he must have some amazing program that he wrote himself to like crunch all the numbers and do everything. But basically, so this is the sheet. Basically it's like you go through, and what I love is I went and looked at this and I realized like you've already, of course, you've added like a page for like the stimulus. So there's all these things, you know, you fill out your personal information, yours and your spouse, if you have a spouse. You put in like your ID, you put in any tax payments that you've made over the year. If you have any kids or dependents.
Stimulus.
Yeah, I know. I already clicked on that. You got your stimulus there, which I do have a further question about that, Mark. You've got your self-employment. So here's where it's great because Mark does work with resellers. This is specifically for resellers. So you can see like, you know, office supplies, like all the different things that go into your expenses. You've got your mileage. And he
explains what they are too. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, what do you mean legal fees? Or what do you mean this? He explains what he's asking you for. When you're looking at your actual Schedule C, if you're looking at, which is the self-employment schedule for a sole proprietor, a self-employed individual. If you're looking at that from the IRS, it is not this detailed. No. So it starts to get confusing. It lumps a lot of things into one area where you deduct, but you don't necessarily know what goes into that lumped in area. Mark breaks it down in the spreadsheet so that you can figure out what goes where, or he figures out where it goes. I shouldn't say that, but he allows you to step by step figure out what your deductions are.
Well, you've got your inventory, so you get to choose if you want to do cash or accrual, and you put in what you spent on your inventory. For doing accrual, then you're looking at the value of your inventory. You've got your home office deduction. So all this different stuff that you go through and you fill this out completely, any donations that you did. So it just basically you fill this out and you send it off to Mark along with any tax forms that you got, you know, like this year I had it somewhere over here. This year, it's like I've got like all these different 1099s now from eBay, from PayPal, from Etsy. I've got, you know, stuff from my health insurance. I've got all these tax forms that got sent
Amazon
to me.
affiliate ones. I've got List Perfectly. I've got, you know, List Perfectly affiliates. I've got so many 1099s from Facebook Marketplace, which are actually lumped in with your PayPal one.
So I've got all these things filled out. And I send them off to Mark along with all my forms. And like my job is basically done unless he has any questions. And then it's all taken care of. So,
and if you have questions during the process, you shoot him a couple of questions and he gets back to you right away, and vice versa. When he gets all of your information and looks at it and goes, what the hell does that mean? He'll send you a question and help clarify. Honestly, it's the easiest process ever. I'm going to say this out loud, but I may not even do an extension this year. I might.
I feel like you're probably full of lies, but
I'm going to hold you to that.
So real quick, Mark, while we're talking you up, you have room to take on some more people if anybody wants to go to you for their taxes, correct? Basically, that means you guys better jump on it if you want it. Now, another thing that you offer, Mark, other than just basic tax services, is you actually have a reseller tax academy. And can you talk a little bit about what your tax academy is?
Yeah, so I mean, it basically is designed to get rid of all the anxiety and uncertainty that you might feel about taxes, and really help you know what the things are you should be doing all throughout the year that are going to put you in the best spot when it comes time to do your taxes. Because if you're not doing any of those things throughout the year, and then all of a sudden it's time to do your taxes, you can't like wave a magic wand and save a ton of money. You know, like maybe you should have set up your business differently, or maybe you should have been tracking your mileage or your inventory differently, but you can't go back and necessarily always do that. So it's really about the day-to-day things that are going to help you optimize your tax and business situation. You know, I talk all about deductions, all about inventory, all about the different types of tax, about, you know, what to do if you get audited, just kind of step-by-step how you need to set things up. You know, what's the difference between an LLC and a sole proprietorship, like all that stuff. So it just gives you the basic education you need to start taking care of that stuff yourself, or to have intelligent discussions with a professional, and just to feel like, you know, a little more empowered with that aspect of your business.
Yeah, and for people who sign up for the Tax Academy, they also have access to you as well, correct?
Yeah, so we have a private Facebook group, and I'm actually, figuring out when I'm going to start doing my live Q&A sessions within that group about the different modules and things like that. Yep.
So we've got the Veranda Files highly recommends the Tax Academy. And if you belong to any reseller Facebook groups like our group or any other group, most Facebook groups will not allow you to ask tax questions. They always say, ask a tax professional. Or if the moderators do not catch the question early enough, you're going to have 75 different answers and about 2 might be right. Looking to other resellers is not necessarily the best way to get answers to your questions. We don't shy away from business questions in our group because I feel like we have a fairly good understanding of what information to provide. But if we do not have the correct answer, we're not giving you a maybe or a guess. And when you have in-depth questions that can't be answered, this is the type of group that you want to be a part of. And, just based on the amount of questions that come into different Facebook groups about taxes, everybody is confused by taxes. If you're not a CPA, you're confused. You have questions. There is confusion surrounding something in your business. So this type of class and course can maybe help alleviate some of that confusion.
And there's a link below to the Tax Academy, and there's also a coupon code for $50 off of the price of the Academy. So if you guys are interested, go ahead and click on that link below. But Mark, let's talk about, there's so many things that are different about 2020, and I want to make sure that we cover them. Let's start with just the stimulus. People who got stimulus payments, is that something that they have to pay taxes on?
No.
Okay. Nope. But that does get figured into our taxes when we do them?
Yeah. So the stimulus is technically an advance on a 2020 tax credit. So they based what you received on your 2019 or in some cases 2018 tax returns. But then you're going to take those numbers and you're going to include them on your 2020 tax return to make sure that you got enough. And if you got too little or you didn't receive anything and you should have, then you'll get the rest of it in the form of a tax credit on your 2020 return. If you got too much, then you don't have to pay it back. It just, nothing happens.
Okay, yeah, because I had heard that like there were still millions of people who were eligible to receive the stimulus that just never got it. And I had heard things about, basically it'll all get figured out during tax season. And so another question I had is, if you receive the stimulus, the first one in 2020, but let's say the second one, I know some people got it in December, but some people who got like actual paper checks, they weren't even issued until January. So will those still be reported for 2020 taxes?
Yeah, that's kind of a unique thing with the 2020 tax return is those ones that were received in January, February, you still list those on your 2020 tax return.
Okay. All right. Next question I have, with the stimulus that they are working on right now that has not been passed yet, this is specifically, I guess I'm asking more for people who have kids, because one of the things in it is a tax credit. And so I guess my question is, for people who have kids, should they wait to file their 2020 taxes, or is that not going to be applicable until next year?
Well, yeah, my guess is that would not take effect until next year. I mean, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's usually how those things.
All right. And what about people who got PPP loans? Do you know yet how that's going to affect taxes?
Yeah, so PPP, it depends. And I mean, so the loan, like a loan in general, is not taxable itself, and any repayments of principal are not deductible, but any interest that you pay would be deductible. And then if you have the whole loan forgiven, that's the thing with PPP, the net loan forgiveness is not taxable either, which is the benefit of the PPP. I mean, so that's it in a nutshell. I mean, my guess is most of the people who watch this will not have gotten a PPP, but there will be a few, I'm sure.
I don't know anyone that was approved for a PPP that is in our reseller community. None.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people that applied.
Yeah.
I do know several that received an EIDL loan, which is which was the one that you do have to pay back, but very low interest over an extended period of time, which means that the interest paid would be deductible, as you just said, if they've paid any interest yet, but there are no payments due for the first 12 months on that. So most people wouldn't have even had to encounter any of that yet.
Yeah.
So I do know a lot of people that received those loans, but I don't know anyone that received the PPP loan in our world. I'm sure there were some, but
yeah.
And then there was the SBA had you could apply for a potential loan, but then $1,000 was grant money.
That's the EIDL loan.
Yeah, so the $1,000 grant, I'm pretty sure a decent number of people in the reseller community did get that. And so would that be, does that even need to be reported as income, or has that handled, just the $1,000?
Yeah, so that grant portion is not taxable, and typically, especially if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, I don't even think you'd report that on your tax return.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Sandra has a question. She got unemployment because she lost all of her pet sitting income last year, and she knows that the state portion is taxable, but is federal unemployment taxable?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Well, luckily she's using you for her taxes this year, apparently. So really she doesn't have to worry about what she does with that.
A lot of people, when they receive the PUA or the, any type of unemployment, the extended unemployment during this last year, you can choose whether you will have your taxes taken out in advance. So that makes your tax portion that you have to repay hopefully easier. So if you did receive unemployment, or if you intend to receive unemployment in the future for any reason, I highly suggest having the taxes taken out before you receive your funds. And that does help with any taxes due on that.
Yeah. So one question that we had I posted this in our group yesterday to see if anybody had questions. And one question that was there was someone asking about unemployment again. And at first there was not going to be unemployment for like small businesses who are people who are self-employed. And I know that in some states, I don't know if all states had it available, but some states people were able to get unemployment if they were self-employed, but there were also some people who didn't access it. And there was some talk about they would be able to get some sort of credit or help once they actually did their taxes. Do you have any information about that at all, Mark?
Yeah, that one I'm not 100% on. I mean, and the unemployment stuff will vary from state to state with, what their thresholds are for how much you can be earning, and still be collecting unemployment and that stuff. So that's not one I'm 100% on.
Yeah. Do you know if there's any kind of tax credits or anything for small businesses or self-employed people as a result of lower income or anything like that?
I mean, the one that comes to mind, and this may not be what you're referring to, but a lot of people, pulled extra money out of their retirement accounts and usually there's an early distribution penalty of 10%.
Okay.
Which is pretty significant. But if the withdrawal was like COVID related, if you can prove, if you had COVID or like a loved one, or, if you can show that it negatively affected your business, then that 10% penalty gets waived.
Okay.
And that withdrawal is still subject to regular income tax, but not the penalty. And you can also choose to have the income tax spread over the next 3 years. So that's an option for people in that situation.
Okay. All right, guys, in the chat, if you have questions for Mark about taxes, about getting your taxes done, or what you need to be doing, please go ahead and ask those. Who Did It 99 says, if you were changing to expensing inventory in a cash basis business, what do you put for accounting method? Could you just, we always talk about this, but it's always been confusing for some people. What is the difference between cash, dealing with your inventory on a cash versus accrual basis?
Yeah, well, and there's two levels. There's like the overall cash method for your whole business, and then within that you have inventory. And historically, most small businesses are overall cash basis, but the inventory piece has always been accrual. That's just like historically what the IRS has typically had for small businesses. But then and that just means that for inventory, you don't deduct it until you sell it. But then just in 2018, they kind of loosened up the rules a little bit where now you can actually, for the inventory method, you can change that to cash basis, which means you can deduct your inventory right when you purchase it. So then it's a little bit simpler. You don't have to be tracking your inventory to figure out, how much, what sold when and all that. So if you change from accrual to cash for your inventory, then you're probably using the overall cash method for everything, including your inventory. So you would just mark, for at least for this question, you would mark cash method.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. Basically, what it comes down to, guys, is when you're doing cash, when you're doing your taxes, you're basically just saying, okay, in the year 2020, I spent X amount of dollars on inventory, whether it's sold or not. Just in total,
It's a straight deduction.
in total, you spent. Let's say
cost
you
of
spent
goods.
10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000. It's whatever in total you spent on inventory, sold and unsold. But if you're doing the accrual method, it gives you a little bit more accuracy on like the health of your business and like your profits and losses and stuff like that. But you have to keep track of how much you spent on your inventory so that when it sells, you can go back and say, okay, I paid X dollars on this particular thing that I sold. And so now I can put that in as a deduction.
I say this frequently, but that is a much more accurate representation of your cash flow and your profit. And that's why accountants will tell you that's the better way to do your taxes. When you're a reseller flipping used goods, that's probably not the easy. It's definitely not the easiest way. It's very important if you happen to use inventory that tends to depreciate over time or that you want to take a depreciation deduction on. And thrifted and used jeans is not one of those things. So you have to weigh, depends on what your business is. If you're someone that's selling lawn and tractor equipment or office products or electronics that tend to depreciate over time, you want to have the accrual method because you want to be able to take that depreciation deduction yearly if you have one, because it's going to help offset your taxes. But if you're somebody like myself or like Katie or a lot of the people watching, and I spend $10,000 on used clothing inventory, that used clothing inventory is really not depreciating from year to year, if that makes sense.
And neither of us have it in us to track our inventory in the way that you have to.
Listen, you've already said that. I've already said clearly that I'm looking for the easiest method, and for me, the easiest method is the cash method for sure.
Yeah. So, Mark, Teresa has a very important question. She's worried that you might be in a hostage situation. You are in a relatively bare, empty room, or she thinks she needs either
with a folding table with a laptop and a blank screen behind you. What's happening in there?
So I thought Mark had left Utah, but apparently it turns out Mark left Utah and then he came back. But apparently he lost his nice office with all the books along the way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. No. This is we've only been in this house for 3 months, and interior decorating is not high on the list of my priorities this time of year. But I do want a better background. That's coming. I just got to figure that out.
You need to have your logo printed out on like a vinyl decal and have it in back of you on at least for that wall.
I like that. Yeah, I'm going to move my desk, so it faces, I have the wall closer behind me. But any suggestions, I'm all ears. I like that idea.
You're doing Zoom calls and you're doing your tax academy and that kind of thing. Always be advertising, Mark. Always be advertising.
That's good feedback.
All right, guys. What other questions do you have for Mark? We've got him here. I know we're going to see over the next couple of months, we're going to keep seeing posts in all these different Facebook groups. And now you actually have a chance to ask a real tax professional. So if you have a question, I don't even know how Teresa handles doing, doing all of her taxes. She's got 5 LLCs. Ridiculous.
I don't even have one. I'm good with sole proprietor. I need to be as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not looking to have an empire. I'm looking to pay my bills. That's it. I go as simple as I can.
Okay, so Rita has a question. If my reselling business is not my main income anymore, should I change my LLC to a sole proprietorship? What is the benefit to keeping my LLC file as S Corp?
So if the LLC is currently an S Corp, well, maybe I should talk about that for a sec. So an S Corp is not a type of entity that can exist alone. Like it's kind of like it's something that's layered onto typically an LLC. So you form your LLC and then you elect to have it taxed as an S Corp, or yeah, basically just taxed differently. So you're still an LLC for state purposes, but you fill out a separate tax form at tax time. So the benefit of continuing to be an S Corp would be that your profits are not subject to self-employment tax. So if you're making over a certain amount of profit, that can be a huge benefit. But yeah, so it probably depends on how much you're making, because if you're not making over a certain amount, then the tax savings that you are realizing might not be enough to offset the additional costs of operating as an S Corp, which include, paying for a payroll service, paying for that separate tax return. So that would be the main benefit.
Yeah, but so it really has to do with how much she's actually bringing in from her reselling business still.
Yep.
Okay.
So it'd be a question to ask your accountant to see what that threshold is.
Yeah. All right. Who did it 99 wants to know, if you elect to expense inventory, what do you do with beginning inventory that was not deducted last year? So basically, I guess when you're like, how do you switch over when you switch over, basically?
And Paula is asking the same question underneath. So Paula, listen to this answer. It's the same question, just phrased differently.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's asking basically, how do I switch from the accrual to cash basis for inventory? And you can do that. Technically, you're supposed to fill out what's called a Form 3115 for a change in accounting principle. But yeah, you basically would just expense or deduct any inventory you have coming into the year, because your beginning inventory is inventory that you haven't yet deducted. So you're just going to add that to the purchases that you incur during that year. Does that make sense? So there's just that adjustment, and then going forward, you'll just deduct your purchases.
So that one year you'll have a larger deduction than you may have in subsequent years, if your income theoretically stays consistent.
Yeah. So exactly what she said. You'll put your beginning inventory, your purchases, and then less ending as zero is what I would do.
Okay.
Good question.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Any other questions? What questions do you have?
He's already answered them. You've asked them. You had your list right there.
Okay, so here's another question for you. So, it used to be a lot simpler when, for resellers like myself, when we just sold on eBay, everything went through PayPal. And now suddenly it's like, and people are branching out to other platforms. So now I'm selling on Etsy, so I get my 1099 from them. But this year, a lot of people got switched to managed payments in the middle of the year. And so, for instance, for me, I think it was the first 8 months I was still going through PayPal. And of course, I went well over my threshold on PayPal. I got my 1099. And I actually feel really lucky that the 4 months I got switched to managed payments, I also went over the threshold because I want that 1099 because it just makes it simpler. And so I got a 1099 from eBay as well. But some people, even though for the whole year they were well over the threshold to get to 1099, they didn't quite hit that with the managed payments part. So they've got kind of a partial 1099 for their year of selling. And now they've got this, couple months where they don't have a 1099 being reported to the IRS. And it's they still need to figure out how to account for that income. But what would your advice be for people who are kind of trying to put everything together from all these different sources? And they may not have 1099s for all of them.
Yeah. I mean, assuming they're not already doing monthly bookkeeping where they have all that, I mean, I would just go to the platforms. Like, I'm pretty sure in eBay, you can download a sales report for the year, and it'll show you your total sales, your total, like, eBay fees and shipping and all that. So I would just take those numbers, and then you would add those to, to the PayPal numbers, or to the, Poshmark or Etsy, because they have reports too. So you'll have to piece it together. But I mean, that's where I would start, just with those platform sales reports.
Okay. Yeah, they're all, Poshmark probably has the worst sales accounting report from my personal experience that I've looked at. The rest of them, well, actually, that's not true. Macari's worse. They don't have one at all. But Poshmark has one, and it's not great. So you do have to kind of finagle it yourself. You're going to have to figure some of those things out. Now, eBay only has a 90-day history of your sales reports, actually.
You sure?
Yes, it only goes back in 90-day increments. You can't get, at least to get the tax information for their taxes that they've collected and paid out on your behalf. Remember, eBay is collecting taxes on your behalf, and that amount is shown in your gross sales on your 1099. You in turn have to deduct the taxes that have been paid on your behalf. That's a deduction. That's a straight deduction. Because you're not paying taxes on money that you never actually received, which is a big flaw in the eBay system, in my opinion. They should not be sending 1099s like that. But I digress. I don't run their accounting departments. But if you need to understand that you should be downloading that information quarterly, because it disappears after 90 days, the tax information part. The rest of your sales will be there. Your gross sales, your refunds, your, the amount that you paid for shipping and your eBay fees, that stuff is still accessible. The tax information is only accessible for 90 days.
Yeah. So Mark, do you have any accounting software that you recommend? I know a lot of people use GoDaddy. I use GoDaddy, although because I am terrible and I don't regularly log in to look at everything, I haven't looked at it since being switched over to managed payments. But I do know you can sync managed payments to it as well. But what are your feelings on GoDaddy or software of that nature?
I think it's a good option for a lot of people. I mean, there's different levels of bookkeeping software out there. GoDaddy is, it's pretty simple. It does have some limitations, but it's still a good option for people who are, value that simplicity. Because if I just told everybody to go to QuickBooks Online, well, I've seen people, they go get it and then they try it for a while, and after a while it just becomes too overwhelming, and then the books just become a mess. So it's just better in that situation to use a simpler program where you might have some limitations. So it just kind of depends. It depends on how many platforms you sell on your comfort level with, bookkeeping software.
I'm like Sandra, a wicked reseller. I like GoDaddy because I'm a dummy about accounting, and that's real. It's probably the easiest one. I've been using it since before it was called GoDaddy. When the eBay seller created it, it was called Outright at the time, and it was free, right. And that was 15 plus years ago. But it's fairly easy, but it does not automatically pull from every platform. So again, you're still going to have to do some work if you sell on multiple platforms. If you happen to just sell on just eBay, it's perfect. Probably the easiest one, because everything integrates. But if you use several platforms, you're going to have to do some work on your own to figure out where everything comes from. I mean, I know that my taxes are going to be more complicated this year than any other year personally, but I'm up for the challenge, Mark. And he's going to try to hold me to not filing an extension. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, guys. What other questions do you have? I know you guys got more questions. Yeah, and speaking of different platforms, like Grailed, as far as I know, has no sales records that you can look at. For me, because they go through PayPal as well. They're included in my 1099 this last year. But,
that's Facebook.
But this next year
is
it's only going to be Grailed going through PayPal, so it's going to be a question of whether or not I actually hit the threshold with Grailed. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, guys, bring on your questions. We've got Mark for another 15 minutes here. So any other tax questions that you have, go ahead and ask them. Let me see. I don't have anything else on my list, but what other questions do you have? Or what questions can you think of people being concerned about?
Oh, so Crystal she says, I use GoDaddy and Thrifter's Scorecard. I've never heard of Thrifter's Scorecard. That sounds good. I can track my inventory and sales across all platforms.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
There you go. That's something to look into. Write that down. Thrifter's, keep that pen. Thrifter's Scorecard. I got to check that out.
Thrifter's Scorecard.
Rita asks a question there.
Okay. Is the balance sheet as important as the profit and loss report for a CPA to file our taxes? I mean, the thing, Mark, I mean, obviously you're going to answer this, but I mean, I don't send you profit and loss reports. So that's kind of more for people's own bookkeeping, isn't it?
For like profit and loss reports?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'll need some type of profit and loss for the year for when you do your taxes.
Sure.
I mean, that's the more important one. Probably the balance sheet will become important if you ever have a partnership or an S corp, because you actually have to like put the balance sheet on your tax return. So that's something I'm going through right now with 2 different clients, is that they don't, most people don't have, I mean, like GoDaddy doesn't have a balance sheet, but if you use a more robust program like QuickBooks Online, you'll have that balance sheet. And these 2 clients do not have a balance sheet. So we're kind of having to like go back and, construct one sort of. Yeah. But yeah, not super important if you're not one of those types of entities.
Yeah. Because I mean, when I do my taxes with you, like I fill out all of the forms, or I fill out all the spreadsheet that you give out. I send you all of my forms that I've been given, like 1099s and whatnot. But I'm not running profit and loss statements and emailing those to you. So as far as like reporting to my CPA to get my taxes done, I guess it just depends on how I have my business set up.
Yep.
What were you asking?
Highlight Liz's question.
Okay. Liz says, I slipped in late, so not sure if this has been covered. If we want to hire Mark to do taxes this year, is it too late? And this is where Mark does this thing where he goes like this. And
you better sign up now.
And that means he's really busy, but Mark's too nice to say he can't take anyone else on. So basically, if you go sign up on his website now, you'll probably get in there.
Yeah.
Fair?
I just don't want to over promise, but I mean, we're early enough now where if you give me your stuff now, then it'll get done.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and the reality is that, you do have options. People do have options like filing for an extension.
Yeah.
Which when you file for an extension, that doesn't mean you don't have to pay your taxes. So if you don't pay your taxes by the extension, or if you don't pay your taxes before the extension,
you pay a penalty and you pay interest on the late payment. But see, Mark, I'm trying to make your life easier. I make your workload easier. You do my taxes in September.
That's actually a good point.
A lot easier. So yeah. I do this for you. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. And the reality is, if, for those of us, when you're not expecting a huge return, you're not necessarily as gung-ho about getting it done before April. So.
Right. It's true.
But yes, I would suggest, Liz, to you and anyone else who's looking to hire a CPA, like seriously, reach out to Mark, because
and either file if you're not going to be ready by April 15th, it is very easy to file for an extension online yourself at irs.gov, or specifically ask Mark to do so for you, but only if you're going to be using him to do your taxes too, obviously. He has a form that he sends out to his clients. Are you going to need me to file an extension for you? I haven't received it yet, but rest assured you will probably get that back from me. I don't know. I'm 50-50.
Yeah. So Amanda wants to know, for someone like me who's very disorganized, where would you begin for filing self-employment taxes? I'm trying to be better for 2021. I'm trying to print out bank statements and whatnot now. So where should you start, Mark?
Yeah. So, I mean, self-employment taxes are calculated as part of your income tax return. So you'll put all of your reselling activity on a Schedule C of your personal tax return. And that in the profit that shows on that form, that it flows through to the main form, and self-employment tax is calculated on that. So if you're using a program like TurboTax or some other program, it's going to walk you through all that. And we'll just calculate that as part of that return.
Yeah. Or if you are going to hire somebody like Mark, you can use his awesome spreadsheet, because basically, as long as you're filling every single thing out accurately, then you're pretty much good to go.
Right. And that's the thing. It's, you don't need, if you're filling the information out correctly, that means you have the numbers and the papers in front of you and you're keeping good, clean records. I do not suggest fudging those records, first of all, because if you are ever audited, you do need to have information to back your shit up. You have to have receipts. You have to have a mileage log. You have to have these things. So a lot of people talk about, this is not the age where you're going to take your shoebox full of receipts and ship them into Mark. That's not going to happen. You need to do some of this work yourself, and you should be. But for me, I keep an accordion file still. I keep a hard copy accordion file where I keep all of my receipts filed by month, my bank statements and my credit card statements filed by month, my actual hard copy of my 10. That might be overboard, but you know what? If I get audited, my shit's right there, and I don't need to try and recreate a mileage log or figure something out like that. I have everything there for me that if anything happens, I can prove that what I'm claiming to have spent, I actually spent.
Yeah.
And I suggest, maybe Mark would say differently, but I suggest doing the same thing. If you don't keep a hard copy, then at least keep files of your stuff, online, so that you can access your backup documents.
Yeah.
You're not just making stuff up. It's you have it there.
So Valerie highly recommends Mark. Says that he did her taxes last year and did a super job. So there's someone else. So G. Jasper has a question for me. He wants to know if my penalty was big for not doing my taxes for 3 years. So when I did my taxes, Mark did all my taxes, came up with what I owed based on all those taxes. I went ahead and paid everything. And then later on, I get the bill from the IRS saying, like, here's your penalties on top of that, basically. And I don't remember what the exact number was, but it was, yeah. So it ended up being like, I think it was at least like $4,000, to be honest, the penalties. And I don't know how they calculate that stuff. But the reason I'm telling you this, what's important is the penalties can seem super scary, but what I did is I actually called the IRS, was able to get somebody on the phone. And I said, I talked to them, and I was like, I have these penalties. Is there anything I can do about them? And basically what they were able to do for me is they set me up on a payment plan. And because I was set up on a payment plan, they actually basically cut my penalties like in half. They took like a couple $1,000s off. And I don't know how they decide that. If there's something, they tell you like, oh, this is something you're able to do one time, or I don't know how it all works, or just telling me that, or who knows. But my point is, they do have scared. They do have the power to help you and to actually lower your penalties for you if you do contact them. And so I was able to do that, set up on a payment plan. I saved a couple $1,000 and I got that paid off. So, all right. So charge Mark. Mark, you have one of the things I really, really appreciate about you, Mark, is that you actually have pricing on your website, which a lot of companies do that thing where it's like you have to contact us and get a quote. So can you explain where people can find the pricing on your website?
Yeah, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a pricing link, I think. But 80% of the people kind of fall in the same range. So those are the prices I have up there. For the typical like reseller tax return, which is your federal, your state, your business Schedule C, it's typically between $400 and $500 in the e-filing. So, if you have like rentals and other businesses, it could be more. If all you have is a W-2, it could be less, but that's kind of the typical range for my general client. Yeah.
And that, which I think is crazy.
Very reasonable.
Affordable.
Very reasonable.
Especially with how much you, I know, so like Vicky used to have this guy who for years did her taxes.
And we talked about it the first time we had Mark on the show. I said, I've been using the same guy for like 12 years.
Yeah.
He knew my business.
We only charged her like $200. So she was like, which Mark is super affordable, but she was like, well, I'm only paying $200. Like, and this guy knows my business and I've been using him for years.
However,
and she was like, why would I switch? But then she switched and what happened?
However, Mark did my taxes the very next year because I said, well, we're talking about Mark all the time. I need to send my business to another reseller. So I used Mark to do my taxes the following year. He found me more deductions and told me that my previous CPA was probably being too conservative. So he saved me more money than I paid him, for sure. And the reality is Mark knew the right deductions to find, where my other accountant was the type of accountant that would I would drop off a stack of receipts and bank statements and things like that for him. He's old school, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he didn't specialize in reselling. So maybe he didn't know to ask the right questions. I didn't have a spreadsheet to fill out, I'll tell you that. I would just mail everything to him in a priority mailbox every year. And he would, and it would take him a few weeks, and then he'd send my taxes back for me to sign and all that stuff. He was old school, and, he did a good job. He was sufficient. The one time I tried to do my taxes by myself, I will say, 7 or 8 years ago, I was audited. I will never freaking do that again. I was audited, and then I had to pay like an extra $1,200, and it was because I put something in the wrong space. I don't know, or I double put something somewhere. Who the hell knows? I used TurboTax or something, or H&R Block online. I don't know. I'll never do it again. I'll tell you that. I'd rather the CPA have their signature on my tax return, knowing that everything is where it's supposed to be. That peace of mind for me is worth every penny. And if you are savvy enough to do your own taxes, God bless you. I'm not that person. But changing to have Mark do my taxes the last 2 years, even though he's technically a little more expensive than my previous accountant, it doesn't matter. The amount of money that he has saved me has far surpassed the fees that he charges, and the peace of mind is worth every penny. I think, honestly, I think he charges very much on the low end for a CPA doing business taxes.
Absolutely.
If you shop this around somewhere, like anything else in life, you get what you pay for. But I'm going to say that for the $400 to $500 rate that he charges is probably 50% to 50% cheaper than most CPAs are going to charge for business taxes, even the simple ones. And I think it's really due to he has it dialed down to a science. So he can afford to do it better because he can do it faster because he knows it that well.
It is interesting. And now, a lot of CPAs are doing more stuff online. So before, if you're in California and you have to use a California CPA, they charge a lot more than somebody in, Kansas or something. But it is interesting. Like, I'm a part of I have my CPA Facebook group with a bunch of other CPAs where they talk and stuff. And some people are on there like, well, I don't charge less than $500 for a W-2 return. And I'm just like, man, how do you charge so much? Or how do you feel good about charging so much, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a reason why we see your name pop up in so many different Facebook groups when anyone talks about taxes and hiring a CPA, is that people realize that they're getting real value from you and they're happy with your service, because not only do you make their lives easier, but they don't feel like they have to go into debt just to be able to hire you to help them. And so I think it just shows your character and your value as a person and as a business. And so I
can't say enough good things about Mark. Honestly, he's going to leave here with a big head, but it's true. He's a nice guy. First of all, just listen to him. But he's very good at what he does and very good at making you feel good about your business. I think it's priceless to have that peace of mind personally.
And so you were talking about different states and stuff, and that's another question that a lot of people that I see people asking. They'll be like, "I'm in Indiana. Do you have a CPA in Indiana that you can recommend to me?" You're in Utah. Does it matter what state people are in if they want to hire you?
No. I have clients in almost every state. So, and as a CPA, the IRS recognizes me in any state if I want to do taxes.
Yep. So nobody has to go and show up at your office physically. Everything that gets done online. Doesn't matter what state they're in, and you can help them out. It doesn't matter if they have state taxes, federal taxes. You're good to go, right?
Yeah. There's a big difference between a CPA and a certified tax preparer. Certified tax preparers are generally certified in specific states. And a CPA is somebody, like Mark said, that is recognized by the IRS across the whole country. There's a lot more that goes into it. So,
yeah. All right. Well, I hope that we answered everybody's questions, and if you've been nervous about getting your taxes done, seriously, it's so worth hiring somebody like Mark to help you through the process. And to get that peace of mind. And if you've been putting off doing your taxes, again,
Like
please,
Katie did.
please listen to me and let me tell you, it's not as painful as you think it's going to be. And the relief that you feel when you finally get it taken care of is all you can do is say, like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? So really, it's something that you need to handle, and it'll make you a lot happier and more able to enjoy the other successes that you have going on in your business. So, yeah. Do you want to say anything else?
That's your counseling for the day.
That's my counseling. Mark, we really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again. And guys, again, all the links are down below. And if you are interested in taking an even bigger step and going through Mark's Reseller Tax Academy, the link is down below. There is a coupon to get $50 off of that course. And again,
I know that we had a lot of people last year sign up as a result of watching our show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we had a couple of testimonials in there from people that did sign up for the Tax Academy. So listen, if this is your 2021 goal, is to get on top of your taxes and to be better about your business and to figure out your accounting methods better for your business, then I can't think of a better way to do that than by having a professional teach you how to do it.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thanks for coming, Mark. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks.
And thanks, guys. We will see you on Sunday. All right. Bye.